All right, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you back to Purpose Driven Pivot. I'm your host, Greg Clay, and I appreciate everyone that's tuning in via Zoom and also live via Facebook. You are in for a treat today because I have another phenomenal guest, man. I just look up to this guy. He doesn't know that, but he'll find out how much I admire him and his work through this conversation. But as a reminder, folks, you can find out all our episodes that are coming up and in the past at gregclay.com/purpose driven pivot. And this interview series starting in June of 2020 will be going forward through June 2021, where I'm featuring awesome guests like my man, Joe Edelin, the superstar, the legend who is with us today. Joe, what's going on, man?
Man, I'm just feeling good after that intro, bro. You using all the right adjectives
Listen,
today, brother.
I'm not even done. I'm not even done, folks. If you don't know Joe, listen, he is, and we'll talk about how he's helped me navigate through service, my civic service, and what I've done in the education space, particularly with the initiative that some of you may or may not know about called Atlanta Speaks. But Joe he's local here in Atlanta. You'll find out where he's from and his background after I yield the floor to him. But he is a teacher and an educator. Now, let me make that clear. He is a teacher and an educator. I have a difference in that space because some people just teach, some people just are educators, but he does both. Out of the way that he's helped young folks and young minds not just learn, what's going on the page, but how to put that in context to critically think as an educator. He's an author, which he's already published his first publication, which I've checked out, and I was glad to support Joe. And he's working on his second piece that he will also talk about. But he is also, man, Joe is in all type of stuff. I found out that he's in the brewery space. I'm going to talk about that, Joe, right?
All right.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about that just a little bit, so the people can know how much of a Renaissance man that you are, But as he continues to just apply pressure around professionally what he does, and just living a lifestyle around just, being your best and full self. He's a graduate of Morehouse, runs with a pretty solid crew. Listen, Joe, your crew's about as solid as mine, man. I'm just messing with you. You got some solid guys around you, man.
Yeah, you got some good folks around you.
Nah, man, shout out to Joe's crew, man. But, Joe, man, again, thank you so much for being here with everything that's going on in the space. I know you're staying super busy. I want to yield the floor to you, man, just to let the people know a little bit about yourself and, where you're from, how you do it, and then we'll jump into the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. This is going to be a good time. You say you look up to me, but I definitely look up to you, brother. You're a stand-up brother in the community, and this is just a pleasure for me. I've been watching you do what you're doing, and so this is going to be a good look.
Appreciate it, man.
A little bit about me, born and raised in Brookline, Massachusetts. It's a small town right inside the city limits of Boston. Let's see, I like you said, I went to Morehouse, but that's my journey in education started before I got to Morehouse. Brookline, Massachusetts, if anybody knows anything about it, is one of the highest per capita expenditure school districts in the country. It's a public school district, but they spend, I think, second in the country in terms of per student. And so growing up, I had one of the absolute best educations public school money could buy.
I did not know that, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And the number one district was the town over. You see what I'm saying? So they're all right there in Massachusetts. And so we had everything. We had, the newest computers back we're talking like 1991, 92. We had the Mac LC2s, right? You had the little paint program on it. So we had all the resources. We had all the programs, we had all access to all these things, and supposedly we're getting the best public school education that was offered in the country, right? And so fast forward, and I didn't have many Black teachers. It was a mostly affluent white town, mostly Jewish. That was my environment. My parents did a phenomenal job making sure I was surrounded by Black peers and Black people in the community outside of school, but in school it was me and a handful of other Black folks, the one or two Black folks in the honors class, that was us. And it was mostly white folks. And so growing up, we were always told about how great of an education we had. And then I went off to Morehouse College, right? And instantaneously, I knew that I was sold, a false bill, right? That I walked into Morehouse and I sat in my History 101 class. And this brother started talking about things having to do with Black history I had never heard of. Started talking about Kemet, started talking about all these other places and these people in Ghana and Mali and Songhay and all these authors, and all these other brothers in the class knew what he was talking about, had heard of these people, had heard of these things. And instantaneously, I was like, something's not right here. Something's not right. I had the absolute best education possible according to money. But I knew nothing about myself and who I was as a Black man and where I came from, outside of what my parents had already instilled in me. So that changed a lot of things for me, because I went into Morehouse as a business major. I was going to do sport. You don't know this, Greg, but I was going to do sports marketing. I was going to go into the sports agent realm, right? And work with athletes and do that.
I could see that, Joe. I could see the way you move around, man. I could see you doing your thing, man.
Look, I think I had seen Jerry Maguire a couple of times, and I think that gave me everything I needed. But my mindset started to shift. And as I learned more about who I was as a Black person and where I came from, specifically, where we came from in terms of civilizations in Africa and all the things we had accomplished and all the things we had done and all the things that had been done to us, my mind started to shift. And I started to look more, and to not to use the word, overuse the word, but my mind started to pivot, right? And I stopped going from being kind of an individualistic, materialistic, money-driven person, which is where I was business-wise. I wasn't trying to start my own business doing any good. I was trying to make money. And I started being like, well, that's not who we are as a people. Sure. That's not where we came from. That was imposed upon us by the folks who stole us and introduced us to this.
Joe, if I might, man, or if I may, there was a point in time, because I went to an HBCU as well, right? And at FAMU, we had intro to our history courses and classes. And there were familiar things, but there was a large gap in even from what I knew and kind of catching up to so much information and context. But I wanted to kind of throw that in there because at HBCUs, like I didn't know that y'all had that similarity. And I imagine most HBCUs may, right, have these curriculums in your freshman year where you get this introduction to our history. Right. And it really, really forces you to think a different way, because the themes and the context is just so different around, what even I was introduced in, being born and raised in Atlanta.
Yeah. And I could tell you about my experience at Morehouse, but I also had, a lot of friends over at Spelman, and they have a course called ADW, and that was their intro to Black history, basically. And every freshman female has to take it. And it's just, it goes into I think the fabric of why HBCUs were established in the first place, right? Is to educate newly freed African-American people, and put them in a good place in society. But at some point in time, somebody decided that in order for us to have a good standing in society, we have to know who we are and where we came from. Yes. And so I started to grasp that, and I started to change what I wanted to do. I started getting away from this idea of business and said, you know what? Something is wrong. If I had this amazing education and I had nothing, what about children who do not come from situations like I had, who do not come from an affluent neighborhood or have all the resources thrown at their public school education? If I'm getting nothing, right? What are they getting, right? Less than nothing, right? Lies, distortions, omissions. And that's when I said, you know what, I gotta do, now that I know better, I gotta do better. And I changed my major. I think it was my sophomore year. Okay. Yep. I came home one break. I don't know if it was Christmas break or summer break. And I told my parents, I said, I'm switching it up, and I got to double down on classes. I'm going to be a history major, and I'm going to learn about people.
How'd that combo go?
It was interesting. It was interesting. It was, my parents have always been supportive of me, and they were like, okay, but what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do? And that was when I had to figure that out. And I tell this story sometimes, that I went to sleep one night and I was tossing and turning the whole night. I couldn't go to sleep. I was in turmoil with what I was going to do with my life, because I had a plan. And then the plan no longer exists because my makeup has changed. Yeah. Who I was had shifted. And so I went to sleep, and I'm tossing and turning. And I started going down this realm, this pathway of, well, what do you want to do? What can you do that will be a benefit to your people and that you could get up and do every day for 40 years for the rest of your life, right? That's where I was at. I was like, 40 years. If you could just do one thing for 40 years every day, what would it be? And I was like, well, I love history. I love learning about our people.
Sophomore year of college, that's a tough box to put yourself in, but I'm with you. I'm with you.
I had to, because I knew at that point that I couldn't do what I had been doing, because working in the sports management industry, I was unhappy. And I could not do something every day and be unhappy. That's not a life to lead. And so how can I be happy? How can I love what I do every single day and make a difference? And then at some point in time, I said, yo, I can teach. Why don't I could teach, and I could teach children and give them the things that I didn't have, and expose them to things earlier than when I got it, because I'm making a change now and I'm 19, 20 years old getting it at Morehouse College. But what if I had gotten it when I was 12? Yeah. Right? How could my life be different? What change could I have made in between, that time and this? And so I decided at that moment I was going to be a teacher. And I promise you, Greg, after I made that decision, it was the best sleep I had ever had in my life. Up to that point and since, it was like a weight had been lifted off of me, and I was set. I knew exactly what I was going to do for the rest of my life.
That purpose piece, bro.
Yeah, absolutely.
The clarity and purpose.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And then from there, I entered in, I dabbled in this idea of maybe getting my PhD and doing higher ed, but I really wanted to teach children. So I joined Teach for America straight out of Morehouse. Went to Houston, Texas, taught there in Second Ward at Jackson Middle School, taught 6th grade social studies. Love my children in Texas, in Houston. Shout out to all my Texas folks. I know y'all going through it right now.
Yeah, shout out to Texas, man.
But I didn't want to stay in Houston, because the population of kids I was teaching in Houston, and I love my children. I really wanted to teach as much of an all Black population as I could, because I really wanted to really focus on that group, because that's my base. That's who I am most concerned with. Yeah. And so then I was like, well, I gotta get back to Atlanta. That's the Mecca, right? Like, that's Chocolate City, outside of DC. And it was I found out about KIPP Charter School, because they started in Houston. I found out about them in just talking to some folks. Went to an interest session, and they had just opened up a school in Atlanta, right next to the AUC, right next to Morehouse, my old stomping grounds. So it's like, I know that community. That's where I want to go. And so I interviewed. They hired me on the spot, and I was blown away. And so I've been with KIPP since 2005. I've been a 7th grade social studies teacher. I've been the assistant principal at KIPP Atlanta Collegiate. I was one of the founding administrators at KIPP Atlanta Collegiate High School, the first KIPP high school in Atlanta. And then after 4 years of being an administrator at the KIPP high school, I missed teaching.
Yep, I remember that. Yep.
We had this conversation. I being an administrator is fine. Managing adults is cool, but it's not interacting with kids on the same thing. And I get all my joy from teaching children.
Joe, I've never heard anyone in education say that. Like, and that's why when I was talking to you about it years ago, I was like, man, Joe about that life. Said, man, I'm in administration. You start in the classroom, and God bless my people that are on the path, right? And you get in administration, do your thing. But when you were like, man, I just miss being in the classroom. I miss that connection, man. Like, that goes back to what you were talking about with purpose. Yeah. And also Faye Hammond said, shout out, from your KIPP family. They're really proud of you.
Wesley Hammonds, that was one of my earlier children. I love that family. They're a fantastic family.
Yeah, man. So that passion to come back from administration into the classroom, I don't know if that's where our journey started from. It may have been, matter of fact, no, it was before that, because you're in administration when we connected initially.
Right.
Part of, my journey, folks, when I was thinking about how I can add value to this network and this framework, was going around asking young professionals, when's the last time you've been in the classroom? Like, you got to get in the classroom. We out here partying, we're doing what we're doing, but these kids need you. And so I started this initiative called Atlanta Speaks, had all these folks interested and didn't necessarily have the relationships at learning centers and schools that I needed. And so I started to flip over these stones and talk to people. And they were like, yo, you got to talk to Joe. He's doing some remarkable things over at KIPP. And so my gateway into not just the experience with Atlanta Speaks, Joe was one of those folks that with that connection and seeing the value of young professional and this energy, he was an administrator that said, I've got a place for you to come and do this type of work, where typically you got barriers and bureaucratic channels that you have to go through. We still had to, from a process standpoint, you make sure we did it right. But man, coming in and working with the students at KIPP Atlanta Collegiate, learning what to do, what not to do when it came to volunteers, helped us up to, we're at over 20,000 kids impacted, man, over 11 years. Yeah. And just that experience. And I have to thank you for that gateway experience, because it helped to motivate me to run into you. We build a friendship during that process, but at the same time, what y'all were doing at KIPP at the time was just so innovative. It wasn't, hey, everybody come in. It was like, hey, we've got this process. We've got this framework that we believe in. And when people can add value to that, then our doors are open to that.
Right.
And Joe, that is very, very rare. Again, when you think about the public education space, and that's why I think from an advocacy standpoint, I appreciate you from the pivot and want to go into back in the classroom for the issues that you and I know, and even our watchers and viewers know. That just means so much for people like yourself that commit every day to doing that work.
Well, I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it. Like I said, like it's all about finding purpose. And I'm lucky. And I talk to my friends all the time about the fact that I know my situation is not everybody's situation. I was able to find my passion and my purpose earlier in life. And I have friends right now who are 40 years old who are pivoting in their own industry to find their passion. Having been in it for 20 years, they're now pivoting and finding that balance for themselves. Or they're still in their lane and they have a side hustle. I got so many people who have side hustles. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you have to find that joy. You can't get up and do something that doesn't motivate you and get you out of bed every day.
Joe,
Somebody won't do it.
Was there something, even for your experience in the classroom, maybe it occurred in Houston, maybe it was here in Atlanta, that forced you to think a different way about curriculum and content as we kind of move into your journey into being an author? When did that occur? Was it more, this epiphany? Was it earlier during your experience, or was it more towards the latter present time?
It was definitely, I became, I think, conscious of it, very conscious of it, right when I moved back to Atlanta, 2005. And I'm looking over the Georgia standards, what they call, I think, Georgia Standards of Excellence, or whatever the state standards were for social studies. And I just noticed how flawed they were. They did, and in seventh grade social studies, for those who've been in Atlanta in education or who grew up here, it's basically Eastern studies. It's Africa, Southwest Asia, and Asia. And it started out, it's like some history component, a lot of geography, and then some economics and politics. But it was told in such a disjointed way, it was laid out in such a disjointed way that I'm like, Atlanta is like however many 90% Black, and you got this curriculum that doesn't really, even though you have the opportunity to teach about Africa, it's not done in any way that reflects the breadth and the beauty of the history of our people.
Sure.
And so I started filling in the gaps. I started literally, and I remember, these were the early days, man, where I was going to bed at 2 a.m., waking up at 5 because I'm creating everything from scratch. I'm trying to create PowerPoints and worksheets and activities to make learning fun, because I hated history when I was in school, hated social studies, hated history teachers. I told my junior year high school US history teacher that I would never be a history teacher ever. I was like, that's the worst job in the world. Like I'd rather scrape gum off the bottom of desks before I was a history teacher. And then now look at me, right? Reason is because there was no connection to me.
Yeah.
All it was to me was dead white people and dates and wars. And that wasn't my paradigm. That wasn't how I was. It didn't interest me, right? It got some people, it just wasn't mine. And then add on that, not knowing, finding out that there was a whole part of history that I didn't know anything about. Mm-hmm. I was like, I got to create this stuff on my own. And so that's what I did. Like I created everything from scratch, and tried as best I could to instill in my kids this love for being Black, this Pan-Africanist sense, this Black nationalist sense, all from a 12-year-old perspective, right? Like you're not going to have folks out there Huey P, with the black jackets and the berets, even though I had some kids who did that. Yeah. I'm trying to make it digestible for kids, and so that they have exposure to this paradigm. Whether they follow it or not, that's on them. Whether they, absorb it or not, that's on them. My job is exposure in as best a kid-friendly way as possible. Mm-hmm. So that's when I first became aware of.
Okay. And so when you found yourself really, bootstrapping these concepts around how do I introduce this in the framework of the current curriculum, did you see yourself with administrative barriers or any bureaucratic barriers that said, well, Joe, you got to put this in a different type of way or type of format that pushed you to be a first-time author? Or was it more of an evolution of, hey, I've got all this awesome collection. I've got this awesome collection of things that I've been doing over the years. Boom, here's the piece, and I'm going to present it.
There are two answers to that question. First, barriers. I never received any real administrative barriers. Not for real. Mm-hmm. Like I did have somebody say, like, you teaching a lot of this Black stuff, but you got to make sure they pass the test at the end of the year, right? And I was like, don't worry, they're going to pass the test. And did they pass this? Yes, 100% of my kids pass the test all the time. But they also got the Black stuff. But I did have a teacher one time. It was a white female teacher. She taught on my grade level. No, she taught on the grade level above me. And she was having problems with her kids because they had all gone through me and now they are with her. And she was having problems because she was teaching and they were pushing back on what she was teaching because she wasn't including their history, or there was no representation in her class. And she was presenting certain issues or certain topics. And they were like, well, I read or I learned that it actually went down this way, right? So she called a meeting with me and administrators at the school at the time.
Now, Joe, you don't have to go as far as you know what I mean. Look,
I call you. Look, I don't. I'm a student of Malcolm, right? So I don't hold my tongue when it's time to speak truth to power. But I won't get into the nitty-gritty details, except that she said, you are teaching the kids to hate white people. And I said, just because I teach my kids to love themselves does not mean that they have to hate you. And that's something that you're dealing with internally. That has nothing to do with our children.
That is and I know I'm going to hit fast forward some, but we got to come back to it because I think this is so important when we talk about the courage to what you exactly said, speaking truth to power. We both subscribe to that. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's extremely
right. And sometimes it comes with consequences. But
it totally does, right? Yeah. And so this notion, even now, as we think about what's going on in this country around, us being proud, even as Black men, to be proud of Black men and supportive, Black men, it's not anti anything. Nope. For us to internalize our feelings about things that we've experienced all our lives and have these critical thoughts around those things related to the present and the future, it's not anti. And the theory that's out there that speaks to that is exactly what you just hit the nail on the head with. And we've got to push back on that narrative. And the more and more we talk about that, the less people can assume that, because, there's not this second page or third page to their thoughts on it, it doesn't exist. No, it might be complex. Mm-hmm. It might be something that you got to kind of think outside or inside the box on, but it's truth. Mm-hmm. It's the fact. Mm-hmm. us being proud of ourselves and our heritage doesn't take away from anybody else.
No, and matter of fact, it should add. I mean, I think that's one of the whole reasons why I do what I do, is that learning about our history and our heritage should add to the narrative. It adds to the tapestry, and everyone should know about it, not just our kids. Because imagine what would happen if all kids, all people knew about the greatness of Black history and where we come from, how that would change the imagery of who Black people are in their minds, how it would juxtapose against what they see on TV and online versus what are facts. And that could change how we interact with each other in society.
Yes.
And so I think that's super important as well. And so to your point, kind of getting back to it, when I started thinking about curriculum, and then what led me to write the book that I wrote, Through Our Own Eyes, and I have a copy of it here, Through Our Own Eyes, A Journey into African American History.
So I would have had my copy, man. I was coming straight from the golf course, man. You know, listen,
we gotta get out there.
I've got it, man.
We got to get out there on the links, but that's a whole other conversation. We'll save that. But I wrote it because I know that Georgia is not an anomaly in terms of its curriculum. And I was like, I need to write something for teachers and for parents who are interested in teaching their kids about true, comprehensive Black history, not Black history that occurs in February, every year, and not Black history that is prescribed just by the standards, because that's limiting as well, but a true comprehensive curriculum. And so I started out in ancient African history and went all the way up to everything in between then, all the way through the Civil Rights Movement, right? And so a lot of our standards, a lot of these history books start at slavery. And the issue there is that if you start at slavery, then what is your starting point? Your starting point is murder, is brutality, it's sorrow, there's no greatness to start somebody's history in degradation and chains. And so I made it a point in the book to start before that and then go through the entire chronology of our.
I like the way you frame that, Joe. The starting in sorrow, because it is so very true. And when you start from there, it really sets this foundation that you've got to kind of break through.
Yeah.
After it cements over time, when you're starting in sorrow, even in my adult years, right? Like I mentioned at FAMU, it's not that you don't believe what you're hearing, it's just that you've been conditioned.
Yeah.
Even around the 1 month piece, like the ability for us growing up in Black communities and Black schools, and then when I talk about my experience here in Atlanta, but yet the only time we should feel it is in February.
Yeah.
Right? Because even in our schools, I mean, it's 99% Black. We're doing the same thing in the Black schools as maybe every other school. I don't know.
Probably.
But being conditioned to only feel this certain way in February.
Yeah, and if you weren't, because here's the thing, right? And this is true for everybody. You can't teach what you don't know, right? And so if you, let's just say Greg Clay decided he's going to be a teacher tomorrow, and he goes in there, he gets in front of kids, but if the education you had was the same education that the white girl or the Asian girl or the Hispanic brother down the hallway had around Black history, then how are you going to do any better than anybody else, right? And so I think that's the thing that people assume just because somebody's Black that they can automatically be an authority on Blackness. That's not the case. That's not the case.
My mind went so many different places when you talk about this authority.
Right.
And that comes with these present day perspectives. We're not going to talk about these brothers.
You already know.
Boy.
Yeah. So the book, like I said, the book is a workbook for teachers and parents, right? It contains 30 different texts around different people and events and civilizations in Black history. But then paired with that, you also have reading comprehension questions. You have a whole bunch of interactive activities. You have STEM connections. I have video links in there that you can scan with your phone, QR codes, because I wanted to make it as interactive and pretty much as plug and play as possible.
Joe, when I went through it, it felt so modern to me. It makes all of the other ways that one might digest content in that context of being in a school or learning center, it makes that instantly antiquated.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
the
I
way
mean,
in
well,
which you
that was
modernize.
kind of my point. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make it easy to use, but not antiquated in how most people think about history.
Yeah.
And so, like, I mean, that was the motivation there.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly innovative, man. Truly innovative.
Appreciate
And
it.
so when we talk about, being vertical with your first opportunity as an author, right? The second opportunity comes up. Can you talk about that a little bit, or is that something like, you want to
I,
reveal?
I'd love to talk. No, it's not under wraps at all. I mean, I talk about it
Okay.
all the time. So my second book is pretty much volume 2 of my first book. So the first book is Through Our Own Eyes, A Journey into African American History. The second book is Through Our Own Eyes, A Celebration of Black Women in History. Because that, as I was going through it, is another major gap in curriculum. When we talk about Black history, it oftentimes is very male-centric. And I, as an educator, was like, I had to do my own research and find out about these amazing heroines through our history who have done things that you wouldn't even know about, right? And I was like, again, if me as a fully educated person with a master's degree and everything in education don't know about these people now, like how can I expect anybody else to, right? And so I just started doing research, and I started doing research around the contributions of Black women in history. So I started in Africa, because we always have to start there. That's where we started. So I started looking at queens and warrior queens, and started, gaining information about them. And then I started going into, various different categories. So I broke the book down into 7 different categories, and in each category there are 7 different women, right? So there's ancient Africa. There's Black women in the struggle for civil and free struggle for civil rights. There's Black women in STEM. There's Black women in business. There's Black women in politics. There's Black women in sports, and there's Black women in the arts. And then there are 7 women within that. And it's the same format as the previous book, in that you have a text about the woman, biographical, and then there are activities that go with it to help children learn, interact with, and retain the information.
So that is awesome.
I appreciate it. And that's coming out, God willing, within the next couple of weeks.
Within the next couple of weeks, we can expect that in 2021.
We can expect that for Women's History Month, which is in March. That's my plan. That's my goal.
We're gonna speak that.
Yes.
We're gonna certainly speak that, man. That is so beautiful, man. When we think about Black History, Women's History Month, and the opportunities for authors like yourself to come into that space, Joe, I'm just gonna throw this out there. Man, are you in a league of your own with this? Not saying that you're the only one focused on it, but when you think about being in education for quite some time, and I want to talk about this curriculum piece too, because you mentioned it before when we talk about this command of this curriculum. Even from my experience as a volunteer coming in and helping more so with industry and business type partnerships, there's this huge barrier or this bureaucracy on even curriculums and how they change and how they pivot. And we use the word antiquated. I think it's extremely antiquated, but we'll get to that. But back to the initial question: are you in a league of your own when it comes to this, man?
No, I don't think so. I have been able to stand on the shoulders of giants. Brothers. You could talk historical giants, but also just mentors in the game. Brother Asa Hilliard, who has passed on, Chike Akua. There are, Tashango and Billy Shaka out of DC. There are plenty of brothers and sisters who are doing this work.
The Hilliard family, strong family, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think Brother Hakeem. But no. So I would say no. I think what's rare is that the work that we're doing is staying in a bubble, right? And so we're talking to it's like your Instagram and your Facebook feed, right? Or what you watch on TV. You have a curated algorithm, and so the stuff that you see on your screen and on your phone are going to be curated to what you already like and the people who are already like you. And so the work that I'm doing, I'm operating in the same circles, as folks who are doing the same work as I am, like you, like me and you vibe, because we're both in works of service, right? And I think what needs to change, or what what I don't know how to necessarily change is, how do I break outside the bubble? How do you break outside the bubble and get people who are not normally engaged in the work that you're doing or the work that I'm doing? How do we engage them in the work? How do I get this book into the hands of people who make decisions around curriculum?
I think that there's no better time than now, Joe. I think that there is a warming of hearts that's kind of going on right now. I'm reading a book, Compassionomics, right now. Hadn't finished it. I'm really on this social intelligence, emotional intelligence kick right now, just in, the learning space that I've been in for the last probably 2 months.
Sure.
And the conversation around how empathy is how you feel, yes, but compassion is the act in that and how you get things done. I think we're in an interesting space where how people feel about what they're seeing is coming into more corporate rooms, more large philanthropic or nonprofit rooms about how they can open their hearts for real change.
Yep.
But just like every window that opens, windows close as well. And so the season around even conversations like these and the timing around saying, all right, what's out there, what's available to position, these types of opportunities. And I hope even that people that will see this or are watching this can think creatively around it too. We've got to lean on systems and structures, because that leverage, once it's gone, I mean, timing is a big part of leverage.
We are a fickle community, man. We are a fickle society. We are a news cycle society.
Yeah, man.
And I posted something on IG. I don't know if you saw it. This is way earlier, months ago. And it showed, actually, I think it was in early January. It showed Google Trends, like the top 9 or 10 Google Trends. You remember that?
I did see that, and it was going, listen, bro.
And then once that time period was over, and it went everything from like George Floyd to Breonna Taylor to Black Lives Matter, and they showed a peak. And then once everybody was done feeling that, it kind of leveled itself out.
You know what it goes to, man? It goes back to the bubble that you're talking about. Because that showed maybe all of user engagement, but in my mind, it's still kind of high because of what I continue to see.
Because of your community, of your bubble, right? That's what it is. That's what it is. But what was interesting on that, somebody pointed it out to me when I posted it, is that there were certain things that did not dip. And it was like TikTok didn't dip. TikTok stayed up. Death and COVID stayed up because it was something that people were interacting with around the globe. Black Lives Matter was a very, very pocketed situation for a period of time, and then it exploded, and then it shrunk again, right? And it no longer was a global phenomenon. And I think that's the thing, is how do we keep the conversation going? How do we keep it global? How do we keep it on people's tongues and minds? And to what you said earlier, as my cousin Charles Johnson always says, apply pressure. How do we keep applying pressure?
The boy Charles, man, I'm so proud of what Charles has continued to do. He's been an alum of the show. Shout out to Charles if you're watching, bro. Just doing awesome things in legislation. If you haven't seen that episode, check it out. Follow his IG at 4Cure4Moms for things that they're doing. But that application of pressure, I mean, that really has to be the theme around not just what he's doing, but also what I'm thinking about in this space, what we've got to do. Because of historical context and being proud of that, it's missing so much, and it's so much information that's out there. Even as adults, we can't get to this plateau and say, well, that's just for the youth. Even just going into your literary work, there's some things that I didn't know, Joe.
Right.
And it's not a matter of me admitting that because I'm ashamed of it. It's like, we've got to be able to say, even as we think about how we communicate to next generations, if this legacy isn't passed down or discussed, then we're missing these great opportunities to build rather than completely start over again. And so I really want us to journey even beyond this show to talk to the appropriate people, to put leverage in appropriate places.
I'm down.
Yeah. And you could tell, even I think about my experience growing up, middle, high school, the gaps that were there, like, again, to your point, starting in sorrow, only in my adult years was this enriching, like stand up and, oh, well, let me not say, well, the civil rights movement certainly being present, but that's, that's very later on in our lineage, especially in this country.
Right. And I agree. I agree. So we got to figure out how to keep applying pressure.
Yep, indeed, indeed. So Joe, man, I mean, we could talk all day about, your journey in education and the pivots within it. I think one of the strongest pivots around, just this evolution of, starting in the classroom, going as an administrator, getting back in the classroom and saying, hey, we've got to fill these gaps with this curriculum going forward. I mean, what's next for you in the education space before we pivot to, talking about what Joe does in his personal life, man?
Right. Well, the biggest thing I have going now in the educational space outside of the book is that I started my own, consulting firm, right? Because this goes back to what we talked about earlier about you don't know what you don't know. And for teachers, so my education consulting firm is called Project Ujima. You can check it out online, project-ujima.com. And basically, Ujima is, Kiswahili word, it's a Kwanzaa word. It means collective work and responsibility. Mm-hmm. And my goal through this company is to work with teachers, schools, districts, to help train teachers around how to teach Black children, and specifically how to infuse these gaps that exist, how to fill in these gaps that exist in the curriculum, how to teach Black kids in a culturally responsive way. And not just Black kids, to be honest with you, because we talked about earlier, like how do we make sure that everybody gets this information? The best ways to incorporate it, how to make it engaging, what resources to use. And so that's what I've been doing these past, I guess now, year, is facilitating workshops, doing professional development, writing curriculum for schools and districts, because that's another big piece. A lot of districts, to your point, are out there right now using this time to say, hey, something's wrong with the way our curriculum is set up. And so I've been helping districts and folks rework what they're doing and what they have in front of them as well.
And I can only imagine what the big shops are doing in their labs to satisfy that urge. I'm not going to throw them under the bus and say it's watered down, but hey, we're here.
Right. Right. And, that's the hard part too, is that there are some states, and this is the barrier I've run into in a couple of different situations. There are some states where districts are beholden to the textbook companies. And so like that, bringing in outside information, outside curriculum, outside resources is hard because they have these contracts with the textbook companies that supply to the state. And the way the contracts have been written up, it's hard. It's like almost like a non-compete, right? Like you're not allowed to bring in a lot of extra stuff. And so if you do, here's the other piece. If you do, then you have to then work with the textbook company and have them rework their whole textbook, which isn't going to happen.
Oh man. And that'll take 10 years.
Right, exactly. So that's what I'm doing outside of the book, because I'm still teaching full time in front of my children every day on virtual. I'm doing this consulting work because that's how I make my greater impact. I thought it was going to be through administration when I was running the school, but I think this is more my lane. I work a lot with equity, that whole DEI space, but specifically around the lane of education and teachers.
Yeah. Well, leaders make leaders. So, I mean, it's all in your purpose, man. That's in my mind, man, you're cutting more leaders, that need to have this type of content or this frame of mind going into what they're already doing in their purpose too, Is it something to where from a consultancy side for those teachers or people that know teachers, they can contact right to you? Like it's not necessarily just the district has to plug into you. Like
no, yeah, I think yeah, absolutely. No, I've been contacted already by a couple of different people who are teachers at individual teachers at a random school saying, hey, I want to bring you in. Can I forward your information, your website and all that kind of stuff? And then we start conversations that way. They do intros over email to principals and stuff like that. It doesn't have to come through the district, especially if you work at a Title I school. Title I schools have money set aside for this particular kind of workshops and professional development.
That's beautiful, man. When you mentioned Title One, it'll be interesting to see how the federal dollar that comes down to districts will pivot towards these types of opportunities,
We'll see with the
considering
new
the
administration.
political landscape.
We'll see with the new administration. That might be.
You know, if it stays the same, that certainly speaks to. And here's the thing about policy and politics too: the rubber stamping and things staying the same, that's a sign as well. You
Mhm.
know, if it stays the same and there's not this disruption that lends itself towards the type of things that we're discussing today, you know, we run into out of touch people all the time. You know, I
Mhm.
know I do. I don't know if you do.
All the time. Malcolm always said that if you stab me in the back and take the blade out 3 inches, I don't consider that progress. Knife is still in my back. You see
It
what I'm
is.
saying? So like
It
we
is.
need radical change.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're saying is right on. Like people are rubber stamping, or you have this, small change. I mean, we see what's happening in schools,
Yeah.
and we see, I mean, no one's blind to it. Um, and so we need some serious radical change. And I'm just trying to do my part on I guess, an institutional level, more, more so than what I can do in the four walls of my classroom, or right
Mhm.
now the four walls of my screen.
And let me say this too, man. For those folks that are thinking like, man, or have been thinking about, man, how can I get engaged? Listen, reach out to Joe, right? If you're saying, you know, I charge people up sometimes, man. Like folks will say they're passionate about education and they don't know anybody, they don't know any teachers or principals or families, and I say, well, I don't know if you're that passionate about education, because you need to know Joe, or you need to know people that are in the space, right? If you want to do something or play a role or be a part of some good work, reach out to Joe Edelin. And there are a lot of people that may know teachers. Reach out to those teachers. Man, I know some awesome, phenomenal people in the space that, from even needing supplies or needing help or needing something, for those people that say, hey, I'm tired of being on the fringe, there's an opportunity for you. Let me just make sure I mention that.
And like you were saying earlier, like you asked me if I'm like alone in this thing. No, there are so many teachers doing some serious great work, but they're literally an island in their own school trying to survive. And yeah, and you probably know somebody who's in there doing that amazing work. Reach out to a teacher, even if it's like a neighbor down the street or whatever. Teachers are going through it right now, especially in this virtual space. It's very interesting.
Joe, man, we're moving, man. We're
Yes, we
rocking
are.
and rolling this
Yes, we are.
conversation, and I wanted to give an opportunity for you to talk a little bit about your endeavors, man. You're a Renaissance man, bro. First off, when I see you out in public, Joe, man, like you got the brands and hats, I'm like, listen, man, this guy's a superstar, man. What is going on here,
I
man?
can't mess with you, bro. I
He's,
can't mess with you. But
he's
here's the thing, right? You see me out, that means I see you out, right? So like wherever I am, you're at. You know what I'm saying? Like don't play with me, brother. I always see you when you're out.
following COVID precautions.
Always, always,
Always.
always.
But
Man.
but man, listen, man. So as a real Renaissance man, when we talk about being an aficionado in the brewery space, man, tell us a little bit about this, man. I kind of see it on social media with the crew, man. Shout out to the boys, man, holding it.
Right.
But it's super intriguing, man. Like, what you got going on?
Let me tell you, man, it's very intriguing. So me and two of my buddies, my brother Lance, who went to Morehouse, shout out to Lance, and Dwight Hosang, shout out to Dwight. We are starting a brewery. We're starting a craft brewery, and it's called Hip Hop Heads Brewery. And it literally is exactly what it sounds like. We are trying to create a bridge between hip hop culture and craft beer culture here in Atlanta. We believe that space can exist. We believe that the two cultures are so strong and that they're both unifying forces. Hip hop is a unifying force. Craft beer is a unifying force. And we love both of those things, and we think other people can love them. And so we want to create a space that brings people together around those two ideas and ideals. We've been home brewing for a little over 2 years now, and we have.
Oh, I gotta get some, man. I'm trying to lose a little bit more of the,
I mean, well, all you gotta do is just put a couple more miles in after you have. You're fine. You're fine.
Says Joe Slim and Trim. Joe says Joe. Okay, I'm with it.
Look, but don't worry, I got you. I can get you whatever you need. But so we've been recently getting more and more serious about it, and we've been talking to a lot of people, being mentored by a couple other existing breweries in Atlanta already. We're in a small business incubator. Shout out to the Village Market and Dr.
Key.
Yep, Dr. Key has
No
been
doubt,
helping
man.
us out a lot. We believe we have something special, and on top of the fact that just from a concept standpoint, our beer is really good. Like it's like we've been perfecting recipes for 2 years. Like a lot of brewers like dabble in a lot of different exotic stuff, and they have a lot of fun. And we decided early on that we were going to focus on perfecting like several recipes that we know we could go to market with that the people will like. And so that's what we've been doing. And so we hope to be on shelves where you actually can buy our beers. Hopefully sometime, earliest would be the summer. That might not happen, but definitely before the end of 2021.
Okay.
And then eventually the plan is to have our own brick and mortar brewery where you can come vibe out with us on some really dope hip hop, and we'll have all sorts of events and fun stuff revolving around hip hop, and also enjoy some cold beer on some of those hot Atlanta days.
Man, listen, that scene in Atlanta, well, starting from the brewery scene, I went to a COVID safe type of environment, outdoor, and there's so much money in it to where like the facilities and, from a hosting standpoint, I mean, it's really, really taking a strong wave in Atlanta. I think, folks like Brandon with Drought Season that are doing some really cool things in that space as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
the brew school. Yep.
Yeah, that really have taken this narrative to your point, and folks are starting to write, man. So it's beautiful to see you and the guys start to write, because it is such a big opportunity, and so goes Atlanta. I think so goes the rest of the country and the world from an influence standpoint. And there's just, for people like you, right, that have influence and I know are doing things the right way, man, I hope it really, really overflows for you, bro. I hope that there's overflow in it for y'all, because I'm looking forward to trying it,
Yeah, no. Look, brother, I have some prepared. I will gladly bring it to you.
You ain't got to bring it to me. I'll come to you, man. I'll mask up, man, and just kind of drive by.
Brother, for all that you do for the community, you need someone to do something for you. I got you. No, but I think, and we love the support. Monday Night Brewery, who's a really big player in the Atlanta brewery game, just did a Black History Month post about us today. It posted today. And we've gotten a lot of that. So anybody who's interested, that's our handle on IG is Hip Hop Heads Brewery. And you can check us out there. We're having a lot of fun, and we do like pop-up events and stuff like that with folks who are involved in the hip hop space, and or just want us to do stuff with them. We love what we do, and it's like another passion project. So you talk about pivoting, like I got my education lane, but I also have other passions besides that. And you gotta do what you love. You gotta do what you love.
When it comes to managing all of those things, Joe, as we come to an end, is there something in particular that you don't have to give out any, Edelin trade secrets, right? Because, I've got my trade secrets of how I get through, and I know you've got yours. Are there things that help you kind of manage all of that other folks can kind of learn through? It may have been a book or a different type of mindset that you adopted from somewhere, or just hard work. You got to chop up the time. I mean, what comes to mind?
So, to be honest with you, there's a couple of things that come to mind. That last part, I mean, if you want stuff to work for you, you got to put in the time. And I'm fortunate and unfortunate, I guess, to be an early riser. And so my day starts, before the sun, no matter what time of year it is. And so I'm up doing stuff in the morning just so I can plug in those hours and get some of that stuff done. I live and die by to-do lists and calendars. And so if it's not on my calendar, and like I will miss it. I used to see my desk. I have Post-it notes everywhere with little check boxes on to-do lists. I love the feeling of checking off a box. Get it out of there. I think those are the things for me. But again, it's not work if you love it. Like I don't feel constrained. Obviously, when you have a lot of stuff going on, you're trying to figure it out, but it's never a bad thing. I don't ever feel overwhelmed to the point where it's like, I got to stop doing this, because I love what I do.
Joe, man, I want to ask you this, man. What's your ideal type of learning environment for kids, man?
Oh man,
What's your ideal type
oh
of
man,
learning environment for kids,
brother,
bro?
brother, brother. I would say my ideal. There's a lot of answers to that. So one, it would be rooted in the history and culture and experiences of the children. And that looks like a lot of things. That looks like what you put around the walls. That looks like how you interact with kids. That looks at like your that deals with, to your point earlier about the social emotional um, situation with children, because kids walk in the building with all sorts of stuff going on. So
Mhm.
um, we have to be cognizant of that.
Mhm.
I would love if I was going to create my own school, every adult body in the building would be certified in child counseling or child psychology, so
Mm.
that every kid has a touch point. No matter what, if they deal with any kind of adult, they can get that help that they need, and that the person knows what they're talking about, as opposed to having to be sent to the school counselor or the social worker when there's usually only one in a building of 3, 4, 500, right? Imagine that workload. I mean, that's what we have going on at the school I'm at. So there's that.
That's going to shoot. That sounds like every school that I've
No,
seen.
it is, and that's what I'm talking about. And then
Yeah.
you can't really be talking about social emotional learning if you're not also training teachers to be touch points for kids, because that's who kids deal with every single day, most of the day.
Yeah.
Um, so that would be that for me. But then also experiential learning, and having also that be centered around kids. I'd love to see a situation. This actually goes back to what you used to do when you used to come to the school with your program, is asking kids what they love, what they want to do when they get older, what they're passionate about. Again, getting back to passion and loving what you do, and then bringing people in the school to teach them that, to build apprenticeship relationships, so that they see the value of this math class, because this sister who opened up her own uh, hair shop is mentoring the young sister and said, you got to know this math if you're going to run this business. Because you said you want to get into hair, you want to do these nails, you want to do this hair. Bet I have my own business, but I also have to know how to run my books, and I need this math to be able to do that. And so now you create a functional relationship that has meaning, as opposed to study for this stuff so you can pass this test. That's what I would love to see. We could talk about that all day, because there's tons of stuff
Yeah.
that we had on.
Yeah. Man, functional relationship between the classroom and business.
Yep.
I haven't framed it that way. I'm start framing it that way. Good.
That's
Good.
what it should be. That's the purpose of education. It should be the purpose of education,
Yeah.
instead of pass this test so you can get this scholarship, so you can go to this school.
Sure, sure, sure. Well, that functional relationship has two sides to it, right? And so
Yeah.
when you at the chamber meeting, or you're at the other, whatever you're talking about in the ecosystem from a corporate side, like,
Yeah.
they've got to be asking themselves that question too from a culture standpoint.
That's right.
You know? You don't see those connections there. So I like that. I really, really do. Man, that was my last question. I had it kind of written down, but I was trying to figure out how to kind of
No,
get it in there.
I love it. I love it.
But man, we could talk for bro. We could talk for 3 hours, man. What
Yes,
one? Well, let me say this, and for everything that you've got going on, man, and being transparent about how you're pivoting in that space, the inspiration that you've been to me, the inspiration that you've been to others, man, Joe. Thank you for the work that you continue to do, and being really transparent about even that purpose that woke you up at night, kept you up at night, right, over at Morehouse. I think that really, really is beautiful when we think about those folks that, or people that have reached out to me that said, man, listening to these types of dialogues help them think about things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And in times like these where folks are having to give themselves a little bit more grace,
Mm-hmm.
but even in that season, we know that there's work to still get done. It,
Absolutely.
it really, really helps. And for leaders like you to spend time talking about that, I think it's beautiful. And I appreciate you being on the show today.
No, man. Thank you. The opportunity has been a pleasure for me. Like I told you earlier, I look up to you, and I think you're. I tell people all the time, those people who don't know you, I say, like, this brother is an authentic brother in the community, like a true servant of the people. Like when you would come in, we'd have like because you've come in a lot of different scenarios and different situations. But I remember very specifically one situation where you came in and there were two speakers lined up, and you spoke, and then there was somebody else who spoke, and just the electricity and the connection that you made with children was so interesting because you could relate to them and you just knew how to speak to people. And you can always tell when someone's a servant of the people because they speak the people's language. And you do that. And so I just appreciate you including me on this journey that you're on to impact as many people as possible.
I appreciate that, Joe, man. I really, really do. Where can folks find out? You mentioned Project Ujima. You mentioned, I want to make sure folks have all the contact information where they can reach out to you as well. Websites, again, just one more time.
Yeah.
So that people can plug in.
Okay. So my personal IG is joseph.edelin, and that's easy. My Project Ujima IG is Project Ujima LLC, and that's just all one thing. The brewery is Hip Hop Heads Brewery. My website is www.project-ujima.com. And those are easy ways to get to me.
Yeah, the people got to be able to connect with you, man, because when the ideas start rolling, they're like, "What's that guy's name again?" It's like, "Guys, Jason. What was it?"
Right,
people got to get connected to you because next week it might be something different. So Joe, again, man, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For those people that are watching live, and for those people that might watch it afterwards, you've heard from Joe Edelin. He's an educator, a teacher, an author, and so much more. Joe, thank you so much for being on Purpose Driven Pivot. Again, you can find context and interviews on gregclay.com/purpose driven pivot as we continue our series. And so, Joe, any last words, man, as we log off?
No, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking with you.
No doubt, man. Hey, have a strong rest of the week, Joe. And for people that are watching, have a strong rest of the week as well. Let's get to it. Thank you.
Thank you.